go through each other. The first cut strips out all the face-up cards onto the top of the pack, between the thumb and the rest of the deck. Then you cut about half of those cards up, maintaining your break, then the other cards up, leaving himself with an absolute stonewaller. If a cheat just needs to control one or two cards, controlling a whole deck, there are a number of techniques he can use during both an overhand shuffle or a riffle shuffle. Here are some of the ones used by those petty, low-down, dirty hustlers. Let's say he wants to just hold the ace of spades on top of the pack during an overhand shuffle. He'll shuffle the pack exactly as you or I would shuffle it at home, but he'll still have that ace of spades on top. How? He uses a brief, a jogged card. Turn the ace of spades face up. As he starts the shuffle, the first card he draws off is pulled back. He'll then shuffle very lazily on top of this so that the jogging of the... As he takes his thumb at the back, he'll now take a brief with his thumb at the back and simply shuffle the ace back to the top. So all he's doing, he briefs a card, takes a brief with his thumb on the card, and then shuffles it back up to the top. So how does he control a top card during a riffle shuffle? Probably the easiest thing a gambler can do, and one that's done by most magicians to control cards. He cuts the pack, riffle shuffles the pack, and in doing the riffle shuffle, simply lets the ace fall last of all. With the ace face up, he cuts, shuffles, and lets the ace fall last of all. And it's fairly obvious that he can control a small block of cards this way. So, cuts, shuffles, and lets his block fall last of all. The technique can also be used for controlling cards on the bottom, for using bottom dealing, for example, simply by letting those fall first and then shuffling on top of them, leaving the cheat's chosen cards in place at the bottom of the pack. However, the real devil for the cheat, and the one that causes them more heartaches and palpitations than any other, is that straight after his shuffle, he has to offer it to the guy next to him for a cut, destroying all his stacking, all his careful preparation. The cheats have come up with many ways to get round the cuts, and they follow up right now. Here's a number of ways to cheat the cut. Firstly with the spectator cutting, and secondly with the cheat himself cutting, which will pass in loose company. But first, the old spectator cut, the hardest thing to bypass. The cheat will offer the pack to the spectator to be cut. In this case, he's trying to control the three of clubs. Or as you'll see, in fact, in this case, he's controlling the whole deck, but this is the card he's interested in. The spectator cuts. Thankfully for the cheat, card parlance dictates that he completes the cut. Instead of actually completing the cut, what he does is he sets the cut back exactly as it was before. So how's this little miracle of magic achieved? The spectator's cut is completely normal. The cheat picks up to apparently do this, but in fact grips the cards in the crotch of his thumb. As he comes to complete the cut, the cards are allowed to drag on the table, and the top half is pulled straight back on top. The spectator cuts, the cards are dragged, and the whole deck is back in exactly the same order it was before. Other spectator cuts include a move magicians would call the pass. A gambler would call this the hop. So once again, we're controlling the three of clubs and indeed the entire deck. The spectator cuts, the cheat picks up the cards and says, who wants to play? And once again, the deck is back in exactly the same order. To magicians, this would be called a riffle pass. Again, the gambler calls this a stroboscopic hop. Fun, fun, fun expression for a difficult move. So here's the cut. The cards go on top. Again, the fingers in here, holding a break upon the cards or a brief upon the cards. As the cards are squared, the fingers grip, and it's a lightning-like action, as I'm sure you've just seen. As the cards are riffled, the bottom section is pulled back round again. So cut, a break, and with a lightning action, those cards are pulled round. To the spectator, all they hear is, who wants to play? And the cheat is ready to deal out and keep the cards he wants for himself. There are a number of ways the cheat can cheat the cut while cutting the cards in his own hands. Now, this will only pass by in loose company. In fast company, they'll want somebody else to cut. But in a loose pub game, he can get away with these kind of moves. Let's say he needs the king of clubs on top. He'll do what's called a poor man's hop, or a leave-it cut, and this is how it works. He'll cut, complete the cut, and leave the card still on top of the pack. It looks kind of strange till you understand exactly what's happening. He's cut here, and instead of coming back to complete the cut as would be normal, he takes back some of the cards. Watch it nice and close, and you'll see he's just doing this. That's one way to fake the cut. Another way is to spinach the deck, which is instead of pulling out the top section, to actually lift and pull out the bottom section of the deck. A variation on the leave-it cut can also be done in the hands, where he'll cut, and as is very common in card games, accidentally leave some behind on the table, pick them up, and then still have the cards he wants on top. Here's how that works. He cuts, leaves some behind, and pulls the original top section out from the bottom to complete the cut. There are also the multiple table cuts to allow him to keep both full deck and certain cards in order. He can cut the pack into 3 little piles and reassemble, keeping not just his top card in place, but here the entire deck order. He cuts a third from the bottom to the top, but doesn't keep them square on the deck. They're actually jogged out slightly. He then cuts about half of those underneath, as so, pulls them to the side, and then drops the middle section down to complete his cut. So it's cut and cut. There are even more complex multiple cuts. For example, where he'll cut this way, cutting the deck into 4 piles, and yet again leaving the pack, and of course his all-important top card, in exactly the same order. So the hands bridge over the pack. Your left forefinger cuts up about 3/4 of the deck. A quarter of the pack comes to the top, as so, and is left briefed out jogged. Again, the cards are split, this time around the middle, and your right second finger takes the top of the bottom half, and your left hand moves apart as so. So in your right hand, you now have the bottom bit you cut to the top, and the top bit of the bottom bit. It's easier to do than say, trust me. And your left hand holds the other 2 sections. The 2 bits split apart as so. Now you're going to drop the top of the right-hand section, followed by the bottom of the left-hand section, followed by the top right-hand section, followed by the last section in the left hand. Not only leaving your top card in place, but leaving the whole pack in order. It looks and sounds extraordinarily complex, and indeed is extraordinarily complex. But if you're going to play cards for a living on a card table, then you've just got to get used to the hard facts of life. Apart from one-handed table shifts seen elsewhere on this tape, highly prized amongst gamblers are false cuts that can be done with one hand only. The reasoning is obvious. The other hand can be used to be throwing chips into a pot, wiping cigarette ash from your sleeve, anything that will give misdirection to the move. And here are the 2 best-known one-handed shifts. The first one is known as the charlier, and has to be said is mainly used by magicians rather than gamblers. But for the sake of completeness, here it is. The deck is cut this way, and a brief or break is held at the back of the deck. Now, in many of the gambling books, they'll show a hand reaching across this way as the shift happens. That's not quite how the pros, if they use this one, will do it. What they'll do, they'll wipe some cigarette ash from their hand, and as they wipe the cigarette ash, very openly for you watching, the halves will be switched. So again, the deck is cut, a brief is held, a bit of cigarette ash is wiped off the sleeve, and the deck is back in the same order. For those of you that don't know the move, here it is without any arm in the way. The deck is straddled in the hand, but half the deck is allowed to drop, or if you're holding a break or brief at the back, everything below the break is allowed to drop. The forefinger pushes and allows that section to ride over the top. Now the problem for the pros with this one, if you can't get away with the sliding motion of the hand, is that the actual motion of the cut is quite large. So most of the pros prefer to go for what they call the front cut, which has also become known amongst magicians as the Erdnase one-handed shift, which goes like this. So the guy cuts the deck. Now notice here, he's jogged or briefed again the card forward on top of this section. The other section goes on top, leaving the brief sticking out, which means as the thumb comes in over this straddle position, he can now take a brief or break at this point. Now the actual motion of the switch is this. It's much smaller than the Charlier. So he's hooking the half around as so. Now it also looks, and it has to be admitted it's true, as a one-handed shift, it's very obvious. You couldn't just put your hand out at a table and do that. This is where this hand comes into action, and this is how the Erdnase works. The deck is cut. We'll hold a bit of a better brief this time, just to give you an example of how good a professional brief should be. He'll throw a chip into the pot. Now, as this hand comes in, that's when the shift starts to happen. So from a better angle for you, the deck is cut, a chip is thrown into the pot, and as the hands come together, the shift is made. So once more from this side, the deck is cut, a chip is thrown in, and as the hands come together, the Erdnase shift is made. So there's two one-handed shifts, highly prized amongst professional gamblers. Cheating the cut is made much easier, however, when the hustler is working with a partner sitting on his right-hand side. There are a number of techniques he can use, some for loose games, some for fast games. Here's how he'd do it in a loose game, and bear in mind, this could only be done once or twice a night. He's false shuffled the pack. He hands the deck to his partner, come other gambler, on his right-hand side to cut, and the guy goes, "Let it ride." Now that's known as a let it ride cut and is done in professional games as well. It means the guy is happy with the cards as they are. But what if he really wants them to be cut? He'll hand the cards to be cut to his friend. As his partner cuts the deck, he'll pull back slightly on the top few cards, allowing them to stick out at the back. As the cheat completes the cut, although not apparently obvious to anybody watching around the table, these cards are still sticking out. As he squares the cards between his fingers, he can now take a finger break upon these cards and go into a hop move or another false shuffle, allowing the cut to be completed. Another way to do this is to use a crimp. As the cheat shuffles the deck, he'll bend down on just the back portion of the deck, crimping or bending these bottom cards. As part of his shuffle, he'll do a cut. Now this leaves a gap right here on the crimp. He offers the cards for his partner to cut, and his partner lightly cuts, which will make sure he always cuts at the crimping of the deck. Now quite interestingly, if you cut a deck this way and offer it to a spectator to cut, then 8 out of 10 times the spectator will also cut at the crimped cards, which bears to mind the interesting fact that people think gambling cheats are always 100% certainties. They're not. The cheat is just going for an edge. Now if I have an ace on top of the pack and you cut it up there 8 out of 10 times for me, then I'm going to win your money 8 out of 10 times. So it'll take me about as long to win your wallet as it's taken you to watch that last cut. Frightening. A move often used by professional poker players in a 5-card draw game is known as the brush. Let me show you how it works simply, and then explain how a partnership can make it devastating. We'll take 5 cards, loosely stacked for my enjoyment on top of the pack, and you'll see the cheat has drawn for his hand 3 kings and 2 odd cards. So instead of throwing the 2 odd cards, which he would normally do, what the cheat will do is square up the cards in his hands, and under cover of his fingers will flex back the kings. Now, this is being exaggerated, obviously, so you can see it more clearly. He'll then throw down the 3 kings and call for 3 cards. The dealer gives him 3 cards, and wonders of wonders, he's got a pair of aces. He now has a devastating combination. If he can get the 3 kings in with the 2 aces, he has a full house, a winning hand. The problem he's got is he's already thrown the kings away, so he uses the brush to switch them back in. Here's how. The cheat will square the cards into his hand and kick down